Hey, welcome to Middle C Method for Guitars. I'm Mark, and in this video we're going to do a deep dive on the fretboard through the eyes of Middle C. But before we get started, I want to just take a minute and do a flashback, tell you a little bit about my background. So the way I introduce myself to people is I'm an '86 high school grad. And by telling people and introducing myself in that way, it gives them a good bit of information about me from the very beginning. You know that I grew up on 70s and 80s music. In my 20s, it was 90s music. And then in my 30s, it was 70s and 80s music again, right? So what I wanted to do before I jump into the fretboard and getting into the details of looking at the fretboard, just give you a little bit of background on me. So I started learning guitar when I was in college as an 18-year-old, and I learned how to play the first position chords. I could play around a campfire and sing along with my friends, but that's about the extent of my fretboard knowledge. And it wasn't until I was about 31, 32 years old that I started to make the time to learn. Now you have to understand this was back in 2001, 2002 timeframe, and so it wasn't as easy to learn as it is today. With the advent of YouTube and especially YouTube Shorts, we've been able to learn quickly the things that we'd like to know and then move on and apply those. In the guitar world, the way I would say it is you learn a new trick, throw it in your gig bag, and keep moving on, right? And so I just wanted to show you real quick how I started studying and what brought me to make these videos and talk to you about the fretboard. You can see here in my old study book, the way I started learning was by handwriting all 24 frets and trying to get myself to remember the notes by repetition, writing it. The way I learned was to write things down so that I could see it in my mind later. And then obviously I moved on to trying to come up with a color system on my own to teach myself where the various octaves of the notes were. And back then, the way you would learn is find a teacher and you would spend time in person with that teacher. And what I did was I started with a local teacher teaching me one 45-minute session. I then expanded that to an hour and a half. And over time, I started to realize my time with that teacher was going to be limited, and I better learn as much theory as I can. So I started learning theory so that after I was done with the teacher, I could continue to teach myself because I'm a guitar student. I have always been a guitar student, and I'm always going to be a guitar student, right? So that's my background. That's who I am. I am here to help my 32-year-old version of myself who understood basic chords in first position, but had a really strong desire to spread out and learn the rest of the fretboard and be able to make songs independent of anything I was learning, or when I watch another person play guitar live, have a better idea, a better ability to see their hands, where they are on the fretboard, and what they're doing. So let's jump back into the first image and we'll go to C major in first position and take a deep dive on the fretboard. Hopefully we'll be able to broaden your understanding and give you some new tools for your gig bag. Like I said, I'm an '86 grad. Got to have these to be able to see the computer for you. Now we have our C major scale up, which is the simple C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and the octave C. So we have our 1, our root note at C. We have our 2 at D. We have our 3 at E. We have our 4 at F. We have our 5 at G, 6 at A, and we have our 7 at B, and our 7 is diminished, and we have our octave, let's see, 8. Okay, so what I want to do now is set the anchors at 1 on the B string and 5 on the G string. And we'll come down and add our octave anchor on the 8 at the E string. So now we have our anchor at 1 on the B string, at 5 on the G string, and we have our octave at 8 on the E string. And so I'll go in real quick. 1, 1, and 8, right? Okay, now we have our ones, our root notes, and we can see that we have 2 root notes that are the same at 1 on the B string and 5 on the G string. And then we have our octave at 8 on the E string. And the first thing that we notice when we start looking at first and second position is that our third, our E note, the E note up here at the open string, the first string or the E string, the open string, and then we have another E which is on the 5th fret of the B string. Okay? And the reason that this is important is these 2 locations here and at the open position, let's see, I'm going to cross that line. Both of these are your 3s, right? Okay, and so the first problem you see when you're working, whether you're working in the first position here or you're working at the 5th fret on the G string, the first thing you notice is that your third for the open E string is a major third. Whereas if you look at the 5th fret, you have your major third, but you also can flatten that third and you can get a minor third by moving back 1 fret. You can create a minor third from the second position by flattening this note, which you cannot do with the open string. Okay, so you already start to see as you move from the first position down to the number 5 on the G string that you're changing what's available to you. You're staying inside the C4 octave, but you're changing what's available to you as you move from the 1 to the 5. Because now you can reach back 1 fret from your root note and you can get a flattened third instead of a major third. And why this is important is when you use, for example, the C minor pentatonic scale, you want that third available to you. You might want to take this D note that's sitting below the flattened third and bend it up half a tone, right? So that you're moving from the 2 to a flattened third. Or you might want to take the flattened third and bend it up half a step to a major third if you're playing something like the blues and you want to move from that minor to major sound, right? And so the first thing you see when you start to study the guitar by using the 4 colors is you get to see, okay, I have the same notes in different locations depending on whether I'm anchoring myself at the top in the first position or I'm anchoring myself at the 5th position. Let's move forward now and take a deeper look at the 5 position. Okay, now when we move forward to the 5 position, we still have our anchor here at the 5th fret on the G string, and we still have our anchor here at the 8th fret on the E string. Okay, when we start to focus on the 5 position and we look at the two anchors that we have, we start to realize a different relationship is happening between our two octaves from the first position. And we remember that we have the ability to flatten our third, the E note. But the pentatonic scale, the 5 notes that we use when we make normal pentatonic runs with the flattened third, is here across from your octave root note on the 8th fret. You have your 4 here on the F. You have your 5 here on the G. And you have a flattened 7 here. So let me go in and just identify these real quick. Now when we look at the board, we can see all of our notes together in a pentatonic fashion with our 1, our flattened 3, our 4, our 5, our flattened 7, and our 1. And if you learn the relationship of your root, your flattened third, your 4, your 5, your flattened 7, and your 1. And if you learn that relationship, once you learn it with the anchor of middle C, you can take it and move it wherever you need it. If you want to use a D pentatonic, D minor pentatonic, you want to be in B minor pentatonic, as long as you learn the relationship that you see here on the screen between the 1 and the flattened 3, the 4, the 5, the flattened 7, and the octave, and you learn where they are in relation to one another based on the G string as your root note, you can always take the pattern that you're learning and move it wherever you want to go. Now I want to jump over to the 10, which is the C note on the 10th fret of the D string. And let's look at the relationship in this format. So if we go in and we set our anchors on the 10th fret of the D string, and we set our other octave note on the 13th fret of the B string, we'll go in and identify those for you. And so now we have our new root notes in the 10th fret, and we have our octave root note on the 13th fret. And when we sit down and look at this relationship, we want to study the same thing that we were learning in the 5 position, where our anchor was on the 5th fret of the G string. Now we're moving our root note down to the 10th fret, and we're 2 frets away from repeating the fretboard at the 12th fret. And so when you look at the relationship between your notes in this position, you start to see, okay, I'm working with a different relationship than I was at the 5 position. I'm still going straight down to get to my 2, to get to my 3. If I were going to play a pentatonic here, that would be my flattened third between the D note and the E note. Now the relationship between the 4 and the 5, because I've shifted over to the D string, the relationship between the 4 and the 5 is different at the 10th fret. I have my 4 directly across from my root note, and I have my 5 at the 12th fret repeating, because this is my G string, right? And so we'll go ahead and identify our 4 and our 5 and our flattened third. Okay, now if we're working with a pentatonic scale and we're running, still staying within the C4 octave, right? We're only doing one octave. We're learning patterns in one octave. If we look at the 1, the root note at the C, on the 10th fret at the D string, we now have a different relationship between the 4 and the 5, and we can see that our flattened 7 has changed its location as well, because our flattened 7 is now at the 11th fret of the B string here. So now we have our flattened 7 at the 11th fret of the B string. And so you can tell by looking at the circles, when you look at the circles on this position, you can see how different the pattern is when you compare it to the 5 position. Next, we're going to take a look at our anchor at the 15th fret of the A string. So let's add our anchors here at the 15th fret. We'll go down and add our octave anchor. Okay, now we've got our 20 position. We have our 2 anchors identified, root note, 15th fret of the A string, and we have our octave at the 17th fret of the G string. And we look at the relationship now, if we're looking at our pentatonic scale like we've been doing, we can find our flattened third. We see we have the same relationship of the 4th across from the root, and we have our 5. So I'll go ahead and identify these real quick. Okay, now we've got all of the notes identified for a pentatonic scale at the 15 position. We can see our 12 across the top, which is a repeat of our open strings. We can see our octave here at the 15th fret of the A string. You can see your flattened third, your 4, your 5, your flat 7, and your 8. And now you're going to see a pattern that will be the same here at the 15, and it will repeat again at the 20. I'll go down and do the 20 last. But you're going to see the pattern repeat, this relationship of the 1, the flat 3, the 4, the 5, the flat 7, and the 8. You're going to see that repeat when we do it at the 20 position. The last thing I want to look at is the 20 position on the low E string. We'll identify our root, identify our octave. Okay, as you can see, now we have our root and our octave. And in the 20 position, we have the ability to reach backwards because we're in a smaller area of the fretboard down here at the bottom. We see we have another 8 anchor that we can reach back for because we're at the bottom of the fretboard now and everything is smaller, right? Everything is a lot smaller. And so we can either go backwards or forwards with pretty much ease here. What I want to show you is this same relationship that we saw at the 15th position, at the 20 position, where if you're playing a pentatonic, minor pentatonic scale, you have the same relationship of notes. Okay, now we have everything labeled again, and you can go back and compare it to where you were at 15. Now at 20, you have the same relationship between the 1, the flat 3, the 4, the 5, the flat 7, and the octave 8. Or you can learn to go backwards up towards your root note. I think we can see it here at the top of the screen. this root note right here, you can see that there's your 15, right? And so when you're working down here, you know that you can either use the box that you've been learning, or you can flow backwards from your flattened third between the D and the E. You can flow backwards from this flattened third here. I'll take it out the other way so you can see it. And so you can move backwards, going back to the position that you had at the 15, or you can work the same box you were using at the 15 that we originally talked about. Okay, guys, I hope you found this helpful. I hope that you picked up some deeper understanding of the fretboard from the video, and I hope you learned something you can put in your gig bag and you can enjoy your journey even more. Thanks for taking the time to watch. If you learned something, hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video.